Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Coffee with Katie. I have my little stoneware heart mug today. Very cute. And today's video is going to be Best Audiobook Recommendations Part 2. This is probably going to be a series that I'm going to do for a long time, but I try to wait a long time in between because while I can enjoy audiobooks and audiobooks can be really good, it doesn't mean it's going to necessarily make it on this list, but it could. And so I kind of give myself time to really think about the audiobooks that really stood out in my mind for one reason or another, and we're going to be going over them today with you. So the first one on this list is actually one that I just finished recently, but ended up falling in love with it. I gave the book 5 stars and loved the story, loved the narration, loved everything about it, and that is A Lady's Guide to Scandal by Sophie Irwin. So one of the reasons I loved this so much, again, was because I really loved the story. It was really engrossing, the tropes were done really well, and there was like humorous elements to them, and I think I just really enjoy Sophie Irwin's writing because I did like A Lady's Guide to Fortune Hunting as well. I would say I loved this one even more, and I got really emotionally invested in the characters, but I think one of the reasons was because the audiobook is done really well, and I obviously listened to all of these on the audiobook. The English accents were great. I really appreciate that in narration, especially when that's kind of the era you're in, because this is a Regency historical romance. You're following the main character, Eliza, who is a widow. Her husband passed away. He was somebody that she married because it was good for her family, but he was a lot older than her, and it was a loveless, kind of sad marriage, and she was married to him for 10 years, and then he passes away and kind of leaves her with an inheritance, and it's a lot of money that she wasn't expecting to get, and so she can kind of do whatever she wants. But she is in her mourning period, which is like a year and a half. So there are some things that she's like limited to do because of society. So she's trying to like make friends, do these things. She goes to another part of England because where she's living is very isolated and she's very lonely. And she ends up trying to make these friends in society, and drama ensues. And the person she was going to marry before this guy is his nephew. So she was gonna marry this guy, and then because it was a better choice financially and for status for her family, she married his uncle instead. So there's like some drama and things going on, but she ends up kind of getting reintroduced to the nephew, and they may start rekindling things. And she also starts making friends with this like rakish author character, Melville. And Melville particularly had a lot of humor in the writing, and it really comes out in the narration and the way the narrator was able to portray the more like stiff characters and Eliza with kind of being scandalous but also just trying to like have some freedom in her life, and the way that she was able to dictate Melville's humor and lightheartedness and jovialness, and just the way that she was able to have the characters' personalities come across. She did it really, really well, to the point where I fell in love with the book, and I also looked up to see if she had narrated anything else I had listened to because I really, really enjoyed her narration. So that one's definitely top of the list. I really, really loved it. I kind of want to reread it, which is a little bit unheard of for me. So, you know, it was good to me anyway. The next ones on this list will be the Emily Wilds series by Heather Fawcett. The first one being Emily Wilds' Encyclopedia of Fairies, and also Emily Wilds' Map of the Other Lands. So for this one as well, again, the accents were done very well in this narration. You're following Emily Wilds, where she's traveling to these different places. She is an academic, a scholar, and she is trying to write an encyclopedia of fairies because there's so many different types of them, and they're kind of all tricky and vicious and have the different things in the way you carry yourself with them, the way you ask for things, like there's gifts, like there's just so many different things to think about, and intricacies to their like interpersonal relationships with fairies and knowing the types and just so much stuff. So she's compiling this encyclopedia for her academic work, and she's kind of living remotely in this like northern snowy town. The narrator is really able to bring out the personalities of the characters again, which I guess is their job, but still, she did it well. There's also an English accent, and then I think Wendell is supposed to be more, I can't remember if he has a Wales accent or more of an Irish accent, but either way, the accent is really fun and it's done really well. Again, I think the humor is able to come across very well when characters are in distress for like silly things, or when they think things are being silly, or when there's a tense moment, or when there's a funny, ridiculous moment where they're tripping over a dog. Like, the way everything is, the way she paints the picture, the narrator paints the picture, is really, really well done. And her voice is very comforting. So I feel like it was so enjoyable to listen to. Even when kind of stressful things were happening in the book, it's kind of a cozy fantasy, but there's also a lot of adventure. I feel like the narrator's voice was still like soothing and lovely. And there is another narrator that comes in every so often when he is Wendell, one of the male characters. He's not in it quite as much, but there is his narration, and I think he does a really good job too. So I really enjoyed those, and I very much look forward to the third book, but that's a good one. I would suggest listening to that if you haven't. The next one is a book I absolutely loved from last year, and that is The Adventures of Amina AlSaafi by Shannon Chakraforty. So the narration for this, well, hang on, let me step back. This book, you're following Amina AlSaafi, who is a retired, basically lady pirate. She's like in her 40s. She's done with this life. She has a family. She has a daughter that she's trying to provide for, so she's like not in the pirate life anymore. But a job comes up and she decides she can't refuse it because it would mean security for the rest of her daughter's life. So she gets back in the game. She comes out of retirement for like one more job, but obviously things become dangerous, or maybe more than she bargained for. And the narration in particular was really fun because I liked the way that they did it, because the book is written in a way where Amina is telling you the story. She's telling you what happened in the book. So she's like, well, let's start here. This is how this happened, and this is how we're getting here. And she'll jump back and forth. So she'll stop the story and she'll tell backstories to get back to the present moment. She'll tell you some backstories of these characters, or backstories of these characters, or these little side quests, or whatever. But you know that Amina is the narrator of the story in the writing, and she's telling you the story after it's already happened. So she's like, let me tell you how this book unfolds. You know, it's like she survived the story essentially. And there's somebody that is helping her write it and helping her tell the story. So the narrator did a really good job of bringing that to life, because Amina will say like, well, this happened and this happened. That she'll be like, what do you mean? But that is how it happened. But it is. Well, then you tell the story. Okay, I thought so. And so like, obviously that's in the writing, but the way the narrator portrays that is really good, because it's very clear when she's saying it like this, but when she like argues with the other person, her voice is kind of like muffled and you can tell she's turning away and there's rustling. So the narration is really immersive as well, and really interesting with all the different aspects of that and the storytelling aspects. The way that's all woven together to create this story, I think makes more sense to listen to it, because that's kind of what is intended in the writing, right? So she's like, let me tell you the story of how this happened. So I feel like when you listen to it, it's a lot more enjoyable, it's a lot more immersive, and it feels more true to the story, if that makes sense. I know that could come off weird, but like the oral teaching, the oral storytelling that is in a lot of Eastern cultures, I think that comes across more, and I think that's really cool. So I loved that audiobook. The humor came across as well a lot. Amina's a great character, so hearing her say stuff or like be in a fight and just be like, absolutely not, was just great. I love that book and I cannot wait for book 2, but I doubt we'll get it. We might get it next year, we'll see. The next one is a Star Wars book, and it is called Lords of the Sith by Paul S. Kemp. And I listened to this, it was fantastic. I think all Star Wars audiobooks are kind of next level because they all have sound effects, they all have a lot of great voice acting and narration, and like musical transitions between chapters. I think they're just really well done, and you know, not every audiobook does that, but all of the Star Wars books that I have listened to so far have done that, and it's really fun. You get to hear lightsaber noises, you get to hear blaster fire, you get to hear explosions. So much going on that makes the audiobook so immersive and so fun that like any Star Wars audiobook really would be great. But the narrator in particular did a really great job because you're following 3 different perspectives. You're following Darth Vader, Palpatine, kind of, and then Cham Syndulla. So he did a wonderful job of doing Palpatine's voice, Darth Vader's voice, the breathing, like all of that good stuff. He did a really great job of transitioning between the difficult voice mimics and acting with that, telling the story, and then the other characters that are involved, and bringing like the emotions out of it. So in this story, they're essentially, Cham Syndulla is a rebel, and he's trying to take down the Empire, and he's kind of doing more drastic things, and so the Empire sends Vader and these other people to kind of squash this rebellion. They end up trapped on this planet with these like terrifying huge bugs, and the story's just kind of working itself out with the rebels trying to survive and the Empire trying to crush them. But it gets really interesting with the interpersonal relationships between Vader and Palpatine and just a lot of stuff. So it was very enjoyable. I loved it a lot. I really, really liked it, and I think the narration with the sound effects and the voice acting just really brought that one to life as well. Another one that I thought of, which is interesting because it's not my favorite of this series, was Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. And I think Love on the Brain is my favorite out of all of her books that I've read so far. But when I was thinking about audiobooks to recommend, Love Theoretically actually came up because I remember the humor being so brought to life and funny when I was listening to the audiobook. So in this one, you're following the main character who's in some sort of science, some sort of STEM. I don't remember exactly, but essentially she's in academia. She's trying to become a professor, not an adjunct. And she is on the side, because she's not making a lot of money, she does fake dating. So she will like let you hire her to be her date. And usually it's like only once or twice, but if it's like a repeat client that's like pleasant and she enjoys working with, she'll work with you again. And so she's been fake dating this client for a little bit, and she ends up realizing that his brother is a professor in this like job that she's trying to get. He's like in the interview process and in the job board. He would kind of like be her boss, but definitely would probably have a say in the matter, you know? So she's in this like sticky, weird situation, and they may or may not fall for each other. But that scenario, she has a roommate with a hedgehog, and the hedgehog hates her. And I just vividly remember hearing her, she's also a people pleaser, so she kind of like spews the truth at some point, but she's a people pleaser that's like not telling you what she really thinks or feels. She's just doing whatever she thinks will work for you. And there's just these points where she's like letting it all out, and I just remember laughing out loud because the way the narrator was delivering the dialogue between the two characters, or between all of the characters when they talk to each other, was so hilarious and spot on and great acting. Also just how she was able to have the characters dialogue with each other. She just did a really good job with it. But I remember particularly like the roommate she's like telling the roommate things that the roommate doesn't want to hear and is very upset about, and she's like, I said this, and the roommate's like, no! And just the way the narrator portrayed that, brought that to life. I'm gonna like say a lot of the same words because that's what I'm thinking, because it's how it made me feel. She just did it really well. And I love it when the humor can really be brought out in the book in those moments, and it can make you laugh because you feel like you're experiencing it. That's what I feel like the narrators did in these ones that I'm talking about. So Love Theoretically, I feel like the narration in particular was really good. So if you loved that book and want to reread it or something, I would listen to it. If you've never read it before, maybe try the audiobook. And last but not least, the next audiobook we're going to be talking about today is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. So this one is kind of interesting because while the narration is done well, I'm kind of talking about it for a different reason, because Travis Baldree himself narrates the audiobook. I'm kind of a sucker for when authors narrate their own works because I think they do it really well, like most of the time. I think usually when authors do it, it's a biography, an autobiography, but Travis Baldree wrote this and he narrated it, and I think he did a really good job. I was kind of surprised. I remember thinking like the narrator is really interesting, and I remember seeing like Travis Baldree, and I was like, wait, isn't that the guy that wrote it? And I looked into it, and it was. So he wrote it, he narrated it, he did all of it. He was really good with the voice acting as well. He did like the very soft voice. He has a very soft voice that, again, I feel like was very comforting, very cozy, which really fits into the vibe of this book. It's a cozy fantasy about a retired orc who's tired of being a mercenary, tired of fighting, and goes into a small town and opens a coffee shop. So I feel like his voice really matched that vibe because it's a very soft and cozy vibe with the coffee shop and the calming aspects and the bakery scents and the pastries they're making and the coffee and like all of that stuff. I feel like his voice captured very well because it was a very soothing, calming, gentle voice. Obviously there's a little bit of stakes, low stakes, I think is what it called it in the cover. But there's some stakes involved with the plot that are not happy, but I think he did all the voices fairly well. They were soft, they portrayed the characters. It was kind of like, I don't want to say cartoony, but he kind of did like a fairy tale-esque kind of narration where he's able to bring out the like soft squeaky things of like the mouse So he did a good job, even if some people would think it's a little bit cartoony. I think he fit the vibe well, and it was really well done, and I think he was like the perfect person to narrate that book. It's already such a beloved and cozy book, so I think his voice on top of that just like really was just like the icing on the cake kind of a situation. So you did a good job, Travis. Well, those are all of my audiobook recommendations for today. Again, this is probably going to be an ongoing series, and I'll continue to compile lists of them when I think of them. But I would love to know any audiobook recommendations you have for me. If there's ones that have really stuck out to you, or you thought the narration was just amazing, I would love to know. Please leave it in the comments below. But for now, that is it for today's video. Please like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I will see you next time. Stay safe and caffeinated. Bye.